Welcome to Student of the Game podcast, where we help you master the fundamentals, fall in love with practice, and win at the game of life. I'm your host, Brad Noll. Welcome to the classroom. Today we're here with my guest, Jon Coffman, head men's basketball coach at Purdue Fort Wayne. Coach, thanks for being here today.
Brad, appreciate you having me on. And you know me well enough. You know I like to talk. I got ideas. You and I love getting together and kind of connecting our two worlds. And basketball really well. Just as the son of a coach, having played at Purdue Fort Wayne, coming to literally all of our games, it feels like, and connecting our worlds together as you're a successful businessman.
Well, thank you. And the genesis of this podcast was, everything I learned in business was literally through sports. So let's let the listeners hear a little bit about who Jon Coffman is. Where are you from, and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, I'm in my 26th year of college coaching, starting this fall, and I love the relationships. That's probably what keeps me going every day. I worked in finance after college, graduated from Washington Lee University in 1996, and I had a degree in economics and started my career in finance out in San Francisco, and spent 2 years doing that, and kind of figured out I loved the people part of the business. Didn't necessarily love the business. I was blessed with our company was bought out. LGT Asset Management was bought out by Invesco, and had an opportunity to kind of get a transition in life really, really early, to where I got a severance package, took off to Alaska for 2 months with my mountain bike, my fly rod, my skis, and the guy who sat in the cubicle next to me. And we kind of, enjoyed life for about 2 months, realized, hey, we got to figure out our next plan. And that's when I had always kind of dreamed of being a high school coach after my high school coach, who really was, next to my father, the most influential person in my life. And so put out, 250 resumes out there, ended up as a Division III assistant, where I was making, I dropped to 4 digits. I don't know if anybody ever talks about making 4 digits. $5,000 was my salary. And I worked for Bob Johnson, whose dad was chief of staff of the Army during Vietnam. I mean, I got a PhD in leadership from him. He went to Army West Point. And then from that point on, just had tremendous mentors. I mean, my high school coach, elite teacher details, Bob Johnson, taught our pace and space, which I now use now. But, he was sort of a Renaissance man, coaching in Southwest Virginia. And he brought in the life skills, which is kind of paid forward for me with our program here, and then went on to work at College of Charleston for John Kress, who dominated his organization, was ultra successful just year after year after year because of how organized he was. And then worked for the youngest coach in Division I, for Derek Waugh, who had relentless passion. Then worked at Colgate under Emmett Davis, and just a phenomenal work ethic, and then finished out here as an assistant coach under Tony Jasic, who really taught me appreciation. Our staff had gotten let go at Colgate, and here I was. I had my wife was also a college coach. We had a 2-year-old son and a young a daughter on the way, and he gave me a second chance, and I think that's where I really, really inspire myself. Hey, treat every job like it's a job you want to be in the rest of your life, and then things are going to be successful after that. And 3 years later, after being let go on a coaching staff for Colgate, I'm a Division I head coach, one of 360 plus, and we've had great success because of that mantra I keep in my head.
That's fantastic. So a little bit about the podcast. We're teaching people, a little behind the scenes of our real estate business. I'll never forget when you and Tracy came to town to look for homes, and there we went and looked, and there wasn't much that really piqued your interest, and then all of a sudden, there was a home, and they're having I think it was a birthday party for some kid or something. And we told them, like, we're coming over to the birthday party. We need to find a home. You're in town this weekend. We went over to the birthday party. I'm yucking it up with the owners, and you and Tracy walking through the home. We left, and we're like, okay, this is the one. Let's go get it. So,
well, I think we had 30. We looked at 32 houses in one day.
Yeah,
and we told you, hey, we're going to buy a house today.
Yep.
Absolutely. The family. And a lot of them, Tracy rolled in, and she knew exactly what she wanted. I think that's kind of what's made us go is my wife is very, very supportive and organized with the life. So having partners in the game really helped too.
Well, and one of the reasons that I got into real estate was because, being the son of a coach, coach's kid, we moved around a lot. And so, our mission is to help people save time, reduce their stress, and help them keep as much money in their pocket. And when you're moving across the country, you don't know anybody, new staff, there's a lot of stress involved. So you guys did a great job. And we'll get off the real estate topic here in a second, but I want to talk about, mastering the fundamentals, falling in love with practice, and winning at the game of life. And there, I remember a couple memories before we get into our conversation today. I remember during COVID, I had some real estate buddies all across the country, and we're like, we need a little locker room talk from a coach. And you got on and got on a Zoom call, and we had a little locker room talk, and that was fantastic. But I want to give you a compliment right now. When you came to Fort Wayne, I believe I was in the top 10 all time in multiple categories. Okay, scoring, assists, free throws, whatever. And you've made it your mission to knock me out of almost and probably all of those categories. And it's not because of how good I was. It's because you have taken the program from what was a commuter campus, Division II, then Division I. And guys were in the state 4 years, and you are now at the point of there's some legitimate national success you guys are having in some respect. So let's talk about, how mastering the fundamentals. First of all, what are the fundamentals when it comes to coaching? You coach fundamentals in your athletes, the fundamentals of basketball you coach, but as a coach, what are the fundamentals that you and your staff focus on?
Well, when you kind of sent me some notes to kind of start getting my mind working, I mean, you had the recruiting, the coaching, and so forth in there, and where I kind of see it, that obviously those are clearly part of our fundamentals, but the things that inspire me, like what goes through my head with everything I do with our fundamentals are, first off, be intentional. Okay. Differentiate ourselves when I put together our fundamentals. All right. Invest in relationships versus being transactional. I think that's why you and I have connected so well. When I came in the town, when we bought the house, and all of a sudden, you're connecting me with people in the community, but even more important at that time, it was connecting me with resources to manage our home. Hey, you had a guy for everything. I love having a guy, but like you had, we had a flood in our house within that first year, and you had a guy call you, late in the evening, and you're like, all right, call this guy. He'll be over there in 20 minutes. And so I think that's because you've really invested in relationships. And then, I've tried to create a platform for fun. We've tried to promote dreams with our team. And most importantly, and I said this in my introduction, I've come in every day and tried to make this the place I want to be the rest of my life. Now, there may be other opportunities that may take me in another direction. Now, I've been here 12 years, and I'm excited. I got a contract through my son or my daughter who graduates in 2030. So like that's exciting. But I think because I do that, I'm not worried about getting the next job. I'm worried about the job I'm in. And like, I'll give you a great example. When I walk from, I don't park, in the closest spot to my office. So I park. I like to get the exercise. I park, way across campus in some shaded area, same spot every day. And that walk, I get to have a walk like I'm on an official visit or an unofficial visit, like I'm pulling up to campus. And every day it's an unofficial visit for somebody. They're coming on, they're deciding, am I going to go to Purdue Fort Wayne after I see campus or not? And most people are making their decision in the first, 15, 20 minutes of a visit and the visual. And so in that walk, I'm looking at from their perspective, and I pick up trash. And it's become almost this obsession, but it's a little bit of this pay it forward. Hey, if the head men's basketball coach, is picking up trash, well, guess what? I'm either not going to drop trash or I'm going to help pick it up. And it just creates this mindset. Also, for me, I don't know, have you ever seen that? It's a YouTube. It's Admiral William McRaven, Texas graduation. And it talks about the speech of Make Your Bed. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
And that's part of we have a whole video series and article series, podcast series we do with our team as we're building our culture every summer. But that piece talks about make your bed. You can change your life. You got to start your details in the morning. And that's kind of, yes, I do make my bed. I listen to the Admiral. But then that's sort of, hey, as I'm getting started in the day, how do I go about that? So that's
fantastic.
Kind of inspires me from those.
No, that's fantastic. So you're almost talking about the fundamentals of your core values, like your core belief system, right? And that's fundamental, which is fantastic. So being intentional, making your bed, picking up the trash. I love your mindset of this is the job I'm going to have the rest of my life. And if it's not if that's not the case, so be it. I think in business, what happens a lot of times, for the listeners is you start off, you have clients or you have customers, and you're always thinking about, well, I want to get into more business. I want more clients. I want bigger clients. I want to create more revenues for my company. And a lot of times, I think being present in the moment, you miss out on some amazing conversations with the relationships you do have, because I believe everything you need is underneath your feet, and the customers, the clients, the players, the team you have. If you're present, they're going to take you wherever your dreams are. I mean, if you're teaching your guys about dreams and goals, relationships win, and that's what this podcast is all about. So that's fantastic about those core values. I know you're doing a lot to teach the young men. Let's keep going with this. Let's talk about
Well, let me
practice.
go
Yeah, keep going.
yeah, and so that's what bases those. And so when you asked me, hey, what are your fundamentals? It was really good, because I think, and I told you why I was so excited to do the podcast with you, it's forced reflection.
Mm.
So many times you just get caught in the grind of the day, and then you got kids, you got their activities, and you're constantly servicing people. And sometimes you don't get to be as intentional, so it helps you kind of go back into who you are. But I as I listed mine, it was leadership, sort of how I inspire and lead our organization, how I've created the lifestyle, recruiting, coaching, fundraising, which goes into NIL, but that's really helped me to pivot our program, and then fundraising, which is sort of like fundraising. But as you talk about leadership and how I've inspired them as my first fundamental, and we talk core values. Those are other things as I develop our program, but our core values, I spend a ton of time. This is where my wife is a 20-year veteran of coaching. She was a head coach earlier than me, so I tried to create our core values on my own. But we're around. I couldn't beat her words. I'm talking. I talked to Shaka Smart. I went to Izzo. I went all these people and researched it. And so, positive mindset, mutual respect, interdependence, and pride. And I could spend hours talking about that. But I do think coaching through core values is very valuable. I try not to have the coach talk with our players constantly. Like, for example, if a guy's late for class, I can talk about why you need to be on time for class. All right. And you can go and go. But at the end of the day, if he shuts off, you become Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 wah. And so you're better off coaching through the core values, like mutual respect. You just valued your time more than the professor and your peers in the class. You talk about pride in the program. You may be an A+ student, and you may say, hey, coach, God, I got an A in that class. I don't even need to go to class. Well, Joe Smith on the team, C+ is the best he can do. That's who he is. He needs to have, that professor's got to say, man, men's basketball players, they're really good students, and in terms of they're committed to this.
Sure.
The other piece, great story, and this goes back to our yogurt place that you set me up with. Okay, and this is where core values are critical as you run an organization. So Tommy was maybe 3 when you gave me that yo-yos card, where I could go get free with one of our friends. Now I could get free yo-yos. Well, back up a second, and I had a mantra in my family, which was Coffman's try everything, thinking at dinner table, okay, green beans, all stuff. Eventually, you're going to like this. So I'd always try Coffman's try everything. Well, then we go to the yoga shop. And this is where I realized you can't coach through rules, okay? We go to the yoga shop. Tommy's 3, and he's testing, okay? And he's going through, and I said, Tommy, that's enough, and it was free. So I was trying to be mutual respect, and he's trying all these things, being rude, holding up the line. And Tommy, at 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old, turns to me, and I had a rule, Coffman's try everything. His dad, Coffman's try everything. And I recognize at that stage, when I become a head coach, can't coach rules. If a 4-year-old can outsmart a rule, so can adults and young adults. You got to figure out how the core values lead you in there so you're fully believing.
Wow. That's a great story, by the way.
The other part of sort of leadership, inspiring them, And I mean, you were there. You were at our Cleveland State game, right?
Yes.
The triple overtime game,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Which could, arguably be one of the greatest games in our school's history. And we go on to win the, ties. So, well, we share a title, Horizon League title, year 2 with Cleveland State. And it gets posted all over Scott Van Pelt that night. And it was my worst moment as a leader and my greatest moment as a leader.
I know where the story is going, but I want the listeners to hear what you're about to say, because I think a lot of times we just get caught up in our successes, and I think a lot of times, we want to, I want to grow my business 10% next year, and I should never have a losing season. And I want you to tell the story, because I think I know where you're going here, because it's a fantastic story on leadership.
So right there, I keep it right there on my
wow.
That's
a picture of a timeout for those that aren't watching the podcast, but that's a picture of a timeout. All right, tell the story.
So, score in that picture 71-71. I don't use my timeouts very often. I teach our guys how to play. We teach them how to play the game. We're coming down the stretch. We're down 2 with less than 30 seconds. And, to make a long story short, we end up with 3 timeouts within the next 24 seconds. My small point guard uses a timeout on his own, gets caught in the short corner. We go to a baseline out of bounds after that, and they put a big man over the top of the ball. We can't get the ball in. I'm sorry, they call a timeout because we've now played each other, I think, 8 times in 2 years because of COVID flax and whatnot. So this is a real rivalry. I mean, 8 times in 2 years. All right, so then they call a timeout to set their D. Then we call a timeout. We can't get the ball. And so it's 3 timeouts. And with media timeouts and whatnot, you're talking about, it felt like 30 minutes. Well, prior to that, I had told my assistants, and I try to communicate with them so we're all on the same page. Hey, I'll set my D, meaning I'm going to call a timeout after we score the ball, tie score, and set your D, meaning that call a timeout. Don't let them get transition. We set our D. We talk to them, tie ball game. How do we close this thing out? How do we get a stop? Well, it happens, all this delay. Our bench maybe doesn't operate the right way in terms of all the reminders, guys and things, but also ultimately it falls on the buck of me. Like, I got to know time and score and situation. And sure enough, I do the worst thing I could possibly do in my college career. I call a timeout when we're out of timeouts after we score the ball with 6 seconds left. And in that picture, I dropped my head. That was a picture. It's on ESPN. It gets blasted all over Scott Van Pelt. My head's down, and I just lost the game because they're going to get 2 shots, ball out of bounds, 6 seconds left. Probably an impossible feat moving forward. And so this is the moment, though. This is where I know we've built culture and we're doing the right thing with our acts of caring, and that I look in the mirror when we have failure, because not one of our players pointed fingers. I had 5 guys in that huddle all reach over and touch me, and every one of them said, "Coach, next play, and had these physical. And we talk a lot about, touches, claps, dance in our program of raising the level of the energy. And I didn't recognize it in the moment. It was after I watched it 30 times on Scott Van Pelt, because, man, I was down. And finally, then here's my other picture. Damian, our little point guard, all right, he reached over there and rubs my head and says, "Coach, I'll fix it." Well, that's going to be impossible. Well, they missed one of the one-on-ones, so they hit one. Then we foul, so now it's down to 4 seconds. Baseline out of bounds. We have all of our scripts all set up. He gets a circle out that runs, nails a 3, and sure enough, little dude, 5'8" dude, fixes it.
Running out of balance 3, and you go to overtime.
And then we win it in triple overtime.
So he didn't fix it there, but he made it right, and then you still had to play more overtime.
It was an awesome moment and I had probably 20 coaches hit me with texts that night or the next morning who watched it.
Wow.
Who said the same thing and said, "Man, like, I know what you did. Like, God, that man, I know how you probably felt. But I can tell you're building special in that locker room because of how they operate.
I want to say something. That I've got a list of questions here that I think the listeners would be really important for you to answer. But I think this story is actually kind of sums up all of the questions in one. You know, the work you've put into building the culture of your team got you through that moment. You know, the guys touching you, rubbing your head, you know, got you through that moment. I think every person listening can testify that adversity is the greatest teacher that's out there. And I remember when I first got started in my real estate career, it was my second or third year, and I was actually being paid as an office assistant. You know, everybody starts at the bottom. I was paid as an office assistant. I had one good month. I think I sold 3 homes. You know, back then I was broke, had no money, and 3 homes was amazing. And I've never seen that much money before. And at that moment, the guy I was working for, he was paying me to be his office assistant, and I had a great month. And he came to me and he says, Brad, I'm no longer going to pay you anymore. You do not work for me any longer. And matter of fact, now you owe me rent for the space you're taking up. And it was a moment of adversity. And I look back, Coach, at that moment as one of those things, kind of like your timeout, like, you know, this could be the end of my career. Like, I don't have any money. And now this guy took away my salary, which wasn't much. And now I have to pay him rent. I don't know how I'm going to do this. But I'm not where I am today if that moment doesn't happen. You know, and I think everybody who's listening can experience or has an experience very similar to that. That's fantastic, and what a big shot.
Yeah, right, and I think that's, you know, that kind of sums up. You know, the next fundamental that I thought was a little bit unique was kind of creating the lifestyle, and that's how we operate. That's, you know, I think organization is critical, and then communicating your organization. And I think that's what creates the synergy we have in our, you know, in our locker room, in our staffing. I mean, you know, we have 7. I mean, I got 7 assistant coaches, between strength coach and trainer and mental performance coach, and I think 16 years as being an assistant, you know, I recognized what was happening behind the scenes. And when I became a head coach, and I knew in our spot as a, you know, a growing mid-major that was underfunded, and actually this is my agent told me that this last year, which is, I don't know, good or bad, but over the last decade, our program has won more games than any Division I program in the country per university dollar spent on it. And so the efficiency. So, you know, and I look back at that, and how do you do that by being intentional? And so, you know, I've created a game plan, like models for everything, all written out and typed out and organized, and constantly looking to reevaluate and pivot. But I'll give you a great example from my models that help my other young assistants, because you know, where our budget sit is I'm hiring young assistants, developing them, and then, you know, pushing them out the door to become head coaches or move to Power Fives or whatnot. But great example is, as an assistant, with recruiting, how many times did my head coach would say, all right, turn to our staff and say, hey, talk to me about who you're recruiting. Well, I'd hear other assistant coaches on our staff, and they'd list out these names and go through their recruiting. And I knew, like, they weren't necessarily recruiting them. You know, maybe in their mind they were, but they were more of a recruiting service. They were talking to their high school coach. They were talking about them. They'd watch the video, but recruiting them, like you got to be talking to the family every week, you know, texting, calling, and, you know, 8 or 9 things go into recruiting somebody. And so I created definitions, because that's where there was a lack of communication in the office space. And so when I became a head coach, I said, all right, we're going to have when we have a recruiting meeting, we're going to have this language that I define, so there's no miscommunication. So, you know, you have an evaluation, meaning that you've seen somebody, okay, watched them on video, gotten a tip on them, you're somewhere. Following, meaning that you've started the recruiting process. Maybe you've called the high school coach, you've called the kid one time. And then the final piece is recruiting them, meaning that you're doing these, and we change up what it is, but these 8 things every week, okay? And we've defined, this is what it takes to recruit. And so everybody's got their 8 guys they're recruiting, and you got your staff of 4, and they got, you know, 36 guys and whatnot. And then you're going to lose a guy you're recruiting. You add one that was following in recruiting. But that way I know, and now we're communicating. And so if you say you're recruiting somebody, you're doing these 8 things every week. And so I think that piece of communication has really been important.
I think communication is you either win or lose with communication. I mean, that's where it starts. And you talk about recruiting, in business. I used to work at a place a while back. There's a fantastic place to work, but they put a cap on the number of people we could have on our team, and so it allowed me to get stuck in not recruiting. And so what happens when you stop recruiting? Well, you're not bringing any new fresh water into the organization. So, those listening, if you're running a business and you need to hire some new talent, what I just heard you say is you got to put the full court press on recruiting. You got to communicate, you got to over communicate, and you got to really build relationships. If I want somebody new on my real estate team, if you want somebody new in your business, you have to break down what's the fundamental, and it's communication. And then it's just going all in and building the relationship, because too many times, you send a message on social media or you send them a note or you call them. But what I'm hearing from you is like, how relentless are you in your pursuit of letting somebody know, I want you in our program. I want you in our company or in our business.
No doubt. And then that goes even further when we're talking about the organization. It takes time to get yourself organized with that stuff. And this probably falls more into your next question. You're going to talk to me about falling in love with the job, but like my practice planning. So with our practice, and I sit back and I take a little bit more of a football approach in terms of, I like to quality control, watch everybody else doing their things, but I'll spend an hour and a half planning a practice, a 2-hour practice. And then I'll call our staff in, and I have it broken down, and they all have their tasks. And I'm talking, it's in whatever 8 font of Arial, with every detail is scripted up there. And then we spend 45 minutes to an hour talking about practice. So now we've spent almost 2 hours between me and our staff preparing for that 2 hours we're going to be on the practice court. And so I think that intentional work allows them to really know what to teach, so we're all on the same page. And then I'm empowering them to coach. Like, if I've been on staffs where the head coach did all the coaching, the other guys sit on the side and clap, and they're bored, and that boredom kind of leaks out into everything else, or they're not on the same page, or somebody asks them a question, they don't know how to answer that, and you start getting undermined. So being on the same page, and that's sort of the lifestyle of how we operate.
Time out. Student of the Game is brought to you by Noll Team Real Estate. Our mission is to eradicate mediocre real estate transactions. On your largest financial purchase, you shouldn't have to deal with average. We do this by helping you save time, reduce your stress, and helping you keep as much money in your pocket as we can. You can help us out by introducing us to your friends or family who want to make confident real estate decisions, whether buying, selling, building, or investing. At Noll Team Real Estate, we are connected to a group of realtors who sell 1 in every 8 homes in North America. If you know someone moving out of your area, there's a great chance we can connect them to somebody we know, like, and trust. Remember, relationships win. Now back to the show. I want to go back to practice for a second, because in our definition of practice, it's all the unseen things that you have to do. So you actually have practice as part of your job description. It's part of what the guys do. Like, you usually know it's practice. But what I heard you say, and I think many people, if they were honest with themselves, would say that they don't practice. They don't fall in love with the practice of being successful in their job. So I want to role play a little bit. So let's say in my job, I know I have to reach out to 10 past clients every single day, or write 5 personal notes every single day. Like, that's the most important part of my day. What you just said is you spend about the same amount of time preparing for practice as what you are in practice. So if you're giving advice to a business owner out there who, we're recording this on a Wednesday, what you would have done is you would say, okay, on Tuesday, I'm going to spend X amount of time preparing for my Wednesday. So talk to me a little bit about what that preparation of practice looks like, and how can listeners be so detailed and thorough in making sure that the next day that they go into, or the next meeting that they go into, is that important.
So there's a sample right there, and you probably can't read it, but you see. I mean, it's a full page of notes that I've prepared. Now, it's a lot of cut and paste, and I'm using past practices. I pull up on my screen, last year's, and then and so forth. So I get to use history.
But you're being intentional, back to one of your core values.
I'm being intentional. And then as I go through practice, I keep a pen in my pocket. And so I'm constantly writing notes about practice, about, okay, hey, let me make this small adjustment for tomorrow, or hey, I saw this with the team. And then I add those notes onto my digital practice plan so that when I see those next year and I see those the next day, so I'm using that information to kind of pay it forward. And so, I got everybody set up with all of our teaching. And then, if there's a drill in there, to have the explanation of each drill and how it's taught. So if one of my coaches, and I try to break it up so each coach is introducing a new team drill. And so I get to kind of watch and sit back, and then they get to command the crowd, because as I'm developing coaches, like, it's important to be able to command the crowd. And so I'm giving them these opportunities, yet I'm watching, critique. I'm ready to step in. Maybe I adjust, I make some notes, and then help them for that. Also at the bottom of that thing, every day, I think this is what's really important too, is I think you have to touch base with your people, all right, constantly. And that's where at the bottom of my practice plan every day, I write 3 players' names at the bottom. It might be somebody that had an issue that I got to deal with, but it might not be. And I try to keep a plan. So I have, over the course of a week, I get an individual saying, and one guy is right after practice. So as soon as we break our huddle, all right, I grab him and we just talk for a second. Okay. And then the next one is going to be, he's going to come up right before he does his recovery in the training room. And then the other one's going to come up after his recovery on the way out. So I'm purposeful for making sure that I'm meeting individually with everybody on my team as we go through that. But I think it's so important to be able to plan and then reflect on that plan after you do it, because there's a ton of failure in a practice. And in my practice, I also have on the side, I have alternative drills. Like, let's say we get, a couple guys get banged up. I go in practice, I only got 12 healthy guys. 2 guys get banged up, and now I can't go to a 5-on-5 drill. I got to go to a 4-on-4 or 3-on-3 drill. I'm prepared. Like, don't let the worst thing happen. You don't have a plan. I think that's really important, being successful.
Well, I think one of the things that I learned when I was there is, the body has limits. I heard this from Colin Henderson, who's a great mind coach here, but the body has limits, but the mind is limitless. Like, I don't think most people really understand how hard they can work. Like, everybody has another gear, everybody has another level. And I learned that through repetitive practice. I learned that through, getting pushed in our sprints, in our preseason conditioning. And so what you're saying is, I'm going to be honest here, and I'm going to say, just listening to you, I'm a student of the game right now. I'm learning right now, saying, am I as detailed, like on a Sunday night when I'm planning my week, am I as detailed as what you are showing up to your practice? How can I get the most out of my team? How can I get the most out of myself and my schedule and the efficiencies, back to, a limited budget and the most amount of wins. I think there's so many people right now, if you take a hard look at your preparation, one of the things I heard was amateurs get paid to play and professionals get paid to practice. And practice is really where, growth happens. Practice is really when the separation happens. So I have questions, but I don't need to ask any questions, because what you're doing is you're helping a lot of people right now understand how important that preparation is.
So, and I'll even talk about recruiting calls. We're constantly recruiting. We're recruiting 2 to 3 classes at one time. And, I talked about, hey, you got to be intentional. You got to have these 8 things you're doing every day. Well, what happens is so many times, like, you just run out of time. And so you're just checking boxes. And so you're calling. And I can't tell you how many times, doors are open. I'm hearing, somebody on staff, and I'll find myself even doing it, where I'll say, like, hey, just Joe Smith, just calling to check in. Well, everybody's doing that. Like, there are other great people at their jobs that you're competing against. And as soon as you say checking in, you're just checking a box, and you're wasting their time and your time, and you're not separating yourself. You got to be intentional, so you're differentiating yourself as you're selling your program and you're recruiting people. And so what I've challenged our people is, every time you're making that call to their parent or the player, you need to be intentional with, what is your message you're going to get across? Okay. And most successful conversations are ones where you get them talking, and I can't tell you how many times, like, I'm going to get off this podcast and I'm going to be like, man, that was a great podcast. Guess why? Because you forced me to talk, and I'm going to walk out. I like hearing myself talk. I'm going to be like, man, I had a killer podcast, and I think inspiring guys to do that. And so I try to lead players into, questions and hear what they want to, what they're looking for. And then I feed them about our program with how they're telling me that. And so I go into every recruiting call with a purpose I want to get out. Now, I may have to pivot as I get to that point, but I'm listening and then I'm giving them about our program in what they want to hear. And I think that's really important is, every phone call, man, that's an opportunity to sell yourself, sell your program, sell your company. And don't just go in without a plan, because you're going to find yourself, stepping in stuff in your yard.
Well, it's being intentional. One of the things, as far as being intentional, I try to dive a little deeper with the words that I'm using, and I still do. But one of the words that I tried to stop using was just. Like, just wanted to check in with you. I was just thinking about you. If I said, hey, coach, I was just thinking about you. If I turned that around and I said, coach, I've been thinking about you and I wanted to see how you're doing. Like that is just that change in getting that word out makes my conversation with you more intentional. And I think, I'm gonna get off this podcast too, and I'm gonna make some calls to my clients, and I'm gonna be intentional, because you're reminding me how important that is. People want to know that you're there to solve a problem. We tell our team the only reason a business exists is to solve a problem. Like, we exist so that we can help people save time, reduce their stress, and help them keep as much money in their pocket as possible. We don't sell homes because people use us because we're number one or we have the best team. You've beat Indiana multiple times, and guys probably aren't coming there because you beat Indiana. That's great for your resume, but they're coming there because of how you make them feel, how you make their parents feel. The problem you're solving is you're showing them that they can grow, develop as a young man, a young student athlete on campus, and then the result that's going to happen from that, that's the problem you're solving. So let's get into a little bit. I know I brought up Indiana. Let's talk about some of your wins. What are some of the wins that you've had since you've been there? And it doesn't need to be a win in a game, but what are some of the wins that you have in your career?
Well, probably the biggest win is that, I've been here through 4 different contracts for 12 years. I got my first Division I head coaching opportunity, and we've had successful at it. We've been successful at it. My wife is, a 20-year veteran of coaching, and my kids are slotted to be able to go to elementary school, middle school, and high school, all while their dad is a Division I head coach. And
that's unheard of, by the way.
I'd love to see the numbers on that. I don't know how you find those stats out, but that opportunity is hard. So there's success in that. The other success is that, when the generations that I've been able to coach here, and then, and watching them succeed in life, like that's a win for me. I just had Mo Evans, who graduated in 2017. He popped by campus, and he's got his second child on the way, and he's trying to move from Grand Rapids down to either Indy or Fort Wayne, get a little closer to family. And I had actually gotten a call from Mike Calder, who was also on his team, that 2016 first championship team in the Summit League. And so I put out this text line, say, hey, who wants to come to campus? I got Max Landis coming in here. His son's coming to camp. You were coming in. Dave Simon was coming in. And Mo said, yeah, I'll come up. I want to see guys. So Mo comes up, and while he's there, we're talking about what he wants to do with his career. And he wants to be a college coach, or at least in player development. And I'm thinking, well, how do we get you there with the next phase? And so then next thing I know is I get him set up with our training facility in town, which I think is a great, OPS, where your kids train as well. I thought that was awesome. And so he, on that moment, got him an interview with that. He also said he just gotten trained to be a high school referee. Just wanted to give back to the game a little bit. I made a phone call, and I got him in a training camp to be a Big Ten referee that next weekend. Now, whether he ends up going that route or not, but, opportunities, and I love when I get to have conversations and use my relationships to help other people. That's a huge win. And then, just you asked me to be on this podcast. That's cool. We've built a relationship. You've helped me a ton in connecting with the people in this community. I think you're an unreal connector. in this community, and to be able to share my message, I think that's awesome. So those are really the wins. I mean, we won a lot of games last year. I became the winningest coach in Purdue Fort Wayne history, Division I and all levels, and that's really, really cool. That's kept me here. But it's more the relationships and being an active member of the community that's really been probably my biggest win.
That's awesome. I mean, I remember my family had a saying that coaches either retire or get fired, and you kind of know what the end looks like. But this podcast is designed to help people understand that in the game of life, relationships win. And when my dad was let go and fired, we weren't coming to games, and it was a touchy subject at the time. But you and Coach Jasic really did a great job of reaching back out and saying, I want this alumni to be strong, and it's something that I've just found a passion in and helping however I can in the program. So as we move forward, there's some challenges, but there's some neat things. And I want to ask you one more question. You said something about fans.
Well, and let me back up. I think because this is important, like talking about your father.
Yeah.
Who was the first Division I coach in history here in the transformation. Mm-hmm. We're going from Division II to Division I. You were part of those teams. Like it was a challenge. Didn't have a league. You're an independent. You're going on the road for probably 70% of your games. To fund the transformation, you were playing 8, 9, 10 bye games. Those are Power 5 games where they're paying you money not to come back to your place. You're on the road all the time and funding, the rest of the athletic part. And that was a challenge and got beat up doing that. But that was important to the development of our program. And I've recognized, and I tried when I became the head coach to pull your dad back in, recognizing that, hey, wins and losses, there were probably some failure there in the losses that happened, but he was set up for failure, but for long-term growth. And he was a big part of where we are today. And if you can create that environment, no matter, whenever you take over a company, if you can recognize the past generations and their successes that have helped you to position yourself to be successful, I think that can really build your brand. That can build people on your team. Like, why would you ever have to say anything negative about anybody else? Like, if you just raise them up and guess what? Now you got a bigger team, and your dad has done a phenomenal job, supporting our growth and tying in those old alums and really building it up. And then, Dane Fife took over, and same thing with Dane. We still, so in 2005, when he took over, he created a creed. All right, where you put your hands in right before practice. To this practice, I promise to dedicate my heart, my mind, my soul, and goes through this whole creed. They says, well, that went to Tony Jasic as the head coach, and I was an assistant there, and I was in the conversation. Do we keep it? Okay. Now he was saying it every day because he was an assistant for Dane for 8 years, and I was like, absolutely, let's tie ourselves to those past generations. And then I became the head coach. I've kept it, and then Dane was doing our TV game at Oakland, this last year. So in 2023, and we brought him into the middle, and we said his creed, and the smile on his face was awesome. From just knowing, like, hey, we've had all the success. We won 2 league titles, beat Indiana in back-to-back years, beat them in Bloomington by 20. All the success, he was part of that. I think that's cool when you do. All right, so fan raising.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. Everything goes into fan raising. My recruiting, well, when I created our style of play, it was recruiting and also fan raising. What do you think of when you watch us play, Brad?
I love how you get up and down the floor. I love how you share the ball. I learned about paint and touch shots from you guys. I learned that your team is going to be intentional with the way you play, and all the guys show up. There's not a guy on the floor that's not going hard. I don't see anybody taking plays off.
And that part of playing hard, like, that's awesome. And a lot of people are trying to do that. And how do you inspire that? That's a whole nother deeper talk. But how we play the game is taking over, knowing that we're a young Division I program. We're trying to build excitement in a great growing city. Most people in our city, even at our Indiana win in front of 12,000 people, you saw a lot of red there. In our, there's a lot of Indiana fans, Purdue fans, Notre Dame fans, but they live in our city. They, I want them to be Fort Wayne fans, and they know they need our university to be successful, and so I said, how do I get them on board? Well, create an exciting style of play. We shoot the three, and I've defined, all right, you cannot play in our program unless you shoot the three. Okay. So I have direction. I give my staff direction. So when they go out there, and so as you're recruiting and you're like, you got to define what you're looking for so that they fit. Here are your standards that a starting point. So it's not just all people. Well, mine is you guys shoot the three. Okay. Then for our style, we shoot the three for space, but then we want to play really, really fast. We want to score the basketball. Okay. We tried to create a sexy style of play. I'm not a very sexy coach, right? So you got to figure out a way. Although Lambert, who gives me my suits, he sets me up. You guys are trying to make me look good, but I create a style of play that people want to watch to try and bring people into the program that has fun around it, scoring the basketball. And then that's also a style that I can sell as I'm a young program. I mean, we changed our brand from IPFW to Purdue Fort Wayne. I mean, that's a challenge in itself. And so as we're going through all these growths, the staple is that how we're going to play. And like, I can sell a style that players like to play. I think that's fan raising. The other piece is everything we do is how do you engage with our community from, your daughter and son were at our camp last week. We don't make a ton of money on the camp because we're donating. I think 50 of them we gave, we had 200 campers, 50 of them we donated to Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, trying to reach out to underprivileged. Okay. We also try and keep the cost down. So we have more people coming in. I mean, it's really taxing on families, you got a lot of things you got to do. But hey, how do we create an environment where we get young people into our program? I love young people. Our players are really good. How do they connect? So our summer camps. Then we had 105 teams come to our team camp. Well, that was, again, we try to keep the cost on, get players and coaches on our program. They may have, how do we get them involved? How do we connect with as many people as possible? Over 4 days, 105 teams, coaches. They may not have players for us right now, but those guys are going to connect us with the player, maybe in the future. So I think as you look at fan raising and fundraising, as you have conversations, they may not be capable of helping you right now, but if everything is transactional and you're only talking to the person that's going to help you right now, people feel that. You got to be genuine.
They absolutely do. I want to say something though, because something you said about this creed. If businesses would say a creed before every meeting, how good would those meetings be? If they talked about, hey, I want to help other people succeed, in our world, in real estate, it's kind of eat what you kill. And in order to build a team, it's very difficult because everybody's out for themselves. I want to grow my business 10%. I want to make more money. But the intentionality of how can I help my staff win? Everybody, if you work hard and you do a great job, you deserve a pay raise. Well, the only way to do that is if everybody shows up and is collective together and working for the same goal. We're about running out of time, but I want to land on a couple things here. I love our conversation about how some of the challenges you experience, how you show up to practice, the detail, success is in the details and in the preparation. I love talking about recruiting because I think other businesses, have the same thing. How do you continue to retain people? How do you go after and recruit new people? But let's talk about some of the challenges on the landscape right now with college basketball, men's basketball right now with NIL, name, image, and likeness. Let's talk about one, what is it? And two, how can people help? How can the listeners help you out right now?
College basketball, college sports, it's a transformation. And I think this is, it's like every business, you're going to constantly get hit with moments that you have to pivot. And you can either fight it and complain and talk about, what you can't do, but that's never going to help you. You got to recognize, all right, every time there's change, it's an opportunity. And can you pivot better than other people and come up with a game plan to take up space? Because every time you change, there's new space there. And you're either going to give up space or take up that space. And so, I've tried to be, like I've said over and over in this podcast, be intentional with that.
I just want to commend you. Thank you for doing work that matters. Thank you for being Fort Wayne's basketball team. Thank you for the leadership you give your staff and your team, because I see it. they're great guys. The autographs and the handshakes and the high fives and the pictures that they take with my kids. You're building a legacy here, and so I just want to say thank you for being a part of that.
Well, Brad, I appreciate you having me on. It was great reflection. I got through probably a page of my 6 pages of notes I put together. It's great for me, to put our ideas and understand who we are and make sure I'm on track for who I want to be. I mean, we graduated 4,000 point scores, our all-time leading score. Just worked out with the Hawks last week, and an elite rebounder. I mean, 5 dudes that really have won a ton of games, won our first Rise League, and now we got newcomers. And making sure that we're developing them, really, really well is good for me. Now, I think one piece I'd love to leave you with that I think is really important because, man, a successful business, which I'm trying to maintain here and you're trying to maintain every day, it's all about people and how you invest in relationships versus transactional. And the world of college basketball has gotten very, very transactional, from the buying of players and NIL and you talk about transfer portal, which, we've always had transfers, but now the transfer portal is more real because they don't have to sit for a year. So they're impacting your roster immediately. So they can leave your program in a whim. And that's where some coaches scratch their heads and say, well, I can't coach him hard because if I coach him hard, he's going to leave the program and transfer someplace else. And so that's where, you got to figure out how to build those relationships, how to surround yourself with other people that are leading those people that are all on the same page, which is really important. And I think, great example is last year. I mean, Jared Godfrey, who's our all-time leading scorer now, broke John Contar's record, who's playing for the Memphis Grizzlies. Jared came back, had, the day after we finished our season, had 12 Power 5 offers, 9 in the top 25, and 6 digits in NIL money offered to him. And we hadn't even really finished. We hadn't even played in the CBI down in Daytona yet. And I had built a relationship over 4 years. He and his mom and I sit down and have a conversation within 30 minutes. We evaluate, we talk about it. This is an option. And he looked at John, who we tested the waters of the NBA, and 17 GM said, no, stay, because this is a good fit for you to be at the next level. Style of play, caring for, don't be a rented player. That helped. But it was that caring for and that relationship. And Jared wanted to be part of this city and leave his legacy and those relationships, and stayed because of that. And so I'd love to say it's all me, but I brought the right people into our program, from players to really our staff. Like this spring when we had to replace, like we brought in 4 players from the portal, it's changed. And so we had 6 weeks, all right, where we had to go basically 90-hour weeks right out of the season, where we had always been a little bit slower. It was kind of, let's be intentional with our recruiting of freshmen. Well, hey, we got to bring in older guys transferring, and now you're speed dating. You're trying to, somebody enters the portal, you got to now identify, you got to get involved with recruiting. So you got to call them, and you don't even know if you want them yet. Then you got to break down their video online. You got to now call their people to figure out, whether you like them. So you're doing all this stuff at the same time to make sure they're the right fit while you're telling them they are, or to some extent, and then figuring this out really quickly while everybody's doing the same thing. As soon as the guy enters the portal, there's 40 guys recruiting. So really, we could spend hours talking about it. But let me back up. What's really important is recruiting the right people on your staff, because those are the people that are paying forward your values, your core values, what you're thinking about, and they got to have buy-in. And it starts with recruiting those people. Like, everybody is short-staffed right now. You hear it constantly. And so what are you doing to find those next people? And I have Adam Blaylock, who's on the office next to me, who's been phenomenal. All right. I met him. He's a junior college coach originally. All right. I met him at a junior college event down in Dallas, Texas. We were the last 2 guys at the event. Junior college event. There's 200 kids playing. All these other coaches, they've gone home to go have their talks, dinners with other high school coaches. I don't know what they're doing, but I like to be the first guy there, the last guy to leave. And I see Adams over there. So it's 2 of us watching these 60 kids still play. All right. At the end of the day, I go over and sit next to him. I said, what are you doing here? So, well, I drove these 3 kids in the game. And so I just start talking about, what he's doing, where he's from, kind of hearing a little bit about his story. So I give him my card and I said, hey, here's my cell phone on there. I don't have an opening right now, but man, I'd love to build a relationship. And I said, for me, people that learn that will be consistent, and I want you to be intentional to give back to our program. So add value to my program, building that relationship. Don't just call me next April when it's time for the coaching carousel. Give value. So for example, send me, hey, I saw this kid. He might be a good recruit for you. Or, hey, we did this podcast I saw. Like, you may want to use this with your team. Hey, we ran this action with our team. Like, this might work for you. Or, hey, watched you play last night. You guys were really good doing this, this, and this. And he did that. And for 2 years, he did that. And then I had an opening, and it was an easy decision. I was like, all right, hey, AB, let's come on. And I brought him into our program. And so I'm doing that constantly. Like, as I get older, I turned 50 this year. And I'm not connected with those young, 21, 22, 23-year-olds, those GAs anymore in other programs. So when I go to the Final Four, whether I have a job opening or not, I have my staff and other staffs. I'm collecting 7, 8 names. I'm sitting down and having a beer with somebody or a coffee and meeting young assistant coaches, GAs, guys coming out of college, and just getting to know them. And then I'm handing my business card, my cell phone. I'm saying, and I'm doing that exact same thing. And I'll see who's consistent. Because if you're consistent over a long period of time, that's who I want in our program. And I think that's really good. If you can have a plan for recruiting young talent, that's what it's all about. How do you keep young talent in your organization?
Well, and you also talked about, recruiting who you already have, falling in love with the people you already have still. So that's fantastic. We'll close this up and ask you one question. I'm going to answer this for you, but if you want to add to it, how can the listeners help you out? Okay, so we have Dons for Fort Wayne, which is our new collective. They can go to that website, they can donate. So Dons for Fort Wayne's a new collective, NIL, get on board. It's a great product here in Fort Wayne. Buy season tickets. People can come support your team. It's like I said, it's a great product here in Fort Wayne. How else can listeners help you out?
If you're in Fort Wayne, casino night, first Saturday in November every year. This year it's November 4th. It's turned into, we had 500 people there last year. It's awesome. Great evening in Fort Wayne. We have a huge auction. It's 25 years of being in sports, and those relationships have created great experiences from, Indy 500, Churchill Downs, US Open, things like that. That helps support our program. And that's, been a big part of our success as a community has embraced us from that standpoint. So, the NIL collective, casino night, fan raising. And then, what inspires me is when people reach out. And so my email address is kaufmanj at pfw.edu. If you have questions or want my notes that I got through about a page of this, or want to talk about the culture of your organization, maybe you're a basketball coach, you want to talk a little hoops. I love that. I share. I don't think we share enough. And so I think this is really cool that you're having me on, and my Twitter at Coach Coffman. I think following that, you kind of see what we're doing on a daily basis, build relationships in our program. And we're a big part of, life skills is huge with us. And maybe you live outside of Fort Wayne and you want to do an educational piece with our players. Our players in the summers, they're doing ballroom dancing, dining etiquette, that we do 3 golf lessons, trying to help them become leaders of men and become leaders in their community when they get done with basketball, and give back to our community while they're here, and get them comfortable being uncomfortable. We've had people speak to us about, insurance, about investing, about, personal branding, and networking. I'd love to have people do Zooms with our program. So just connecting with people is awesome. We play all over the country. You want to come to a Dons game, hit me on Twitter, send me an email, and we'd love to have you come and be a part of it. Come to the shoot around before. You may even get to sit on the bench. We'll offer that up at our casino night too.
That's fantastic. Last question I have for you. So we believe in the game of life, relationships win. And the kids these days talk about, give them their flowers, which means appreciation, send them some respect. who is one person in your life that you want to send some flowers to that has, shaped you into who you are today and helped you get to where you are?
Well, when I don't know if this is something to bring up to your staff all the time. It comes from our sports psych, who sits on my bench, really helps me manage our player from mental performance and also mental health. You cannot be stressed and appreciative at the same time. Your mind can't do it. And we all are caught in a lot of stresses. Life is busy, it's complicated, it's stressful. And so, having these moments of appreciation are huge. I've been very blessed with a lot of people that have impacted my life, from my mom and dad, to the coaches. I mean, Coach Bell, my high school coach, Bob Johnson, my first coach I worked for in college. Those two, other than my mom and dad, have impacted my life more than anybody else. And the person that unfortunately gets forgotten a lot as I tell my story is my wife, Tracy Coffman. And, I talked earlier in the podcast about, my core values. I tried to come up with words that were, better or different than hers, and I couldn't. She's my Cliff Notes. I get caught up planning while I'm in it. I mean, our guys are on campus 11 months out of the year. I love reading, but she gets to finish the books more. And she's constantly figuring out things for me and addressing it, my quality control, and also keeps me really grounded because, my two kids did not choose, like they did not choose for me to be a Division I basketball coach, and they get a lot of benefits from that. They sat courtside at the Final Four the last 2 years. I mean, 72,000 people had worse seats than us. But that's just one day. And you got 364 other days. How are you, Dad? And my wife really helps me manage and balance that and keeps me on track, and is phenomenal. And it is, we're in this, journey together. And it's really cool because she's a college coach too. And we really complement each other. So, I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to give her a shout out.
Awesome. So, Tracy, if you're listening, we just sent you some flowers. So, Coach, thanks for being on today. This has been a pleasure. Selfishly, this is so much fun to talk about what you're doing at Purdue Fort Wayne with the men's basketball. But I really hope the listeners heard a lot of the business ideas, the things that you're doing, the preparation, the accountability, the life skills. Knowing that being a part of something bigger than yourself is really what's most important. So, it's no wonder why you're having some success. Keep it up. Best of luck to you, and go Dons.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me. Go Dons.
Thanks for listening to Student of the Game podcast. Whatever game you are playing, I'm cheering for you. See you in the next class.